What happens when Hollywood's most controversial superstar faces off against daytime television's most outspoken host? You won't believe what unfolds when Tom Cruise sits down with Whoopi Goldberg on The View and everything spirals completely out of control. This isn't just another celebrity appearance gone wrong. This is a full-scale meltdown that had security rushing to the stage and producers scrambling to cut to commercial. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash in what becomes the most explosive confrontation in daytime television history. Last night's episode of The View was supposed to be a straightforward promotional appearance. Tom Cruise was there to discuss his latest Mission Impossible project, charm the audience with his trademark intensity, and move on to the next stop on his publicity tour. Instead, what viewers witnessed was a verbal battlefield that escalated so quickly, even the seasoned panel members sat in stunned silence as their colleague and guest tore into each other with ruthless precision. The tension was palpable from the moment Cruise walked onto the stage. His usual megawatt smile seemed forced, almost mechanical, as he took his seat next to Whoopi Goldberg. The audience erupted in their typical enthusiastic applause, but something felt different. Goldberg's greeting was cooler than usual, her handshake brief and perfunctory. The other panel members, Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, exchanged glances that suggested they sensed the underlying current of hostility brewing between their co-host and their guest. "Tom Cruise, welcome back to The View," Goldberg began, her voice carrying an edge that regular viewers would recognize as her warning tone. "It's been a while since you've graced us with your presence." Cruise's response was immediate and sharp. "Well, Whoopi, I'm here now, aren't I? Sometimes the most important conversations happen when they're ready to happen." The audience laughed, thinking it was playful banter, but the panel members knew better. Joy Behar leaned forward slightly, her media-trained instincts kicking in as she attempted to steer the conversation toward safer ground. "So Tom, tell us about the new Mission Impossible film. The stunts look absolutely insane." But Cruise wasn't interested in playing along with the standard promotional script. His eyes remained locked on Goldberg as he spoke. "You know, Joy, what's really insane is how people in this industry, people who should know better, spread misinformation about things they don't understand. They create narratives that serve their own purposes rather than seeking truth." The camera captured Goldberg's jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. She knew exactly what Cruise was referring to, and so did anyone who had been following the behind-the-scenes drama that had been building for months. The comment was a direct shot at Goldberg's recent criticism of Scientology during a previous episode where she had questioned the organization's practices and their influence on Hollywood. "That's interesting," Goldberg replied, her voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "Because I've always believed that seeking truth means asking the hard questions, even when they make people uncomfortable, especially when they make people uncomfortable." Sarah Haynes jumped in quickly, sensing the escalating tension. "Tom, can we talk about your preparation for these incredible action sequences? The physical demands must be enormous." But Cruise wasn't backing down. If anything, Goldberg's response had only emboldened him. "You know what's physically demanding, Sarah? Having to sit here and listen to someone who claims to seek truth while actively spreading lies and prejudice against people's deeply held beliefs, that takes real stamina." The studio audience began to murmur. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity interview they had expected. The energy in the room shifted dramatically as viewers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the crew members behind the cameras were exchanging worried glances. Goldberg's famous composure was starting to crack. Her hands gripped the edge of the table as she leaned forward. "Lies and prejudice? Really, Tom? Is that what we're calling investigative journalism now? Because last I checked, asking questions about organizations that have been accused of harassment, intimidation, and breaking up families isn't prejudice. It's responsibility." The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Cruise's face flushed red, his trademark intensity now focused like a laser on his host. "Accused by whom, Whoopi? Disgruntled former members? People with axes to grind? You're smarter than this, or at least I thought you were. Alyssa Farah Griffin attempted damage control. Maybe we should take a step back here. Tom, your fans are excited about the movie, and that's really what we're here to discuss. But Cruz was beyond redirecting now. No, Alyssa. I think this is exactly what we need to discuss. Because this woman, he gestured toward Goldberg, sits here every day pretending to be some kind of moral authority while she attacks people's faith, their choices, their right to believe what they want to believe. Goldberg's laugh was harsh and bitter. Faith? Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I sit, it looks more like a system designed to control people, to separate them from their families, to extract money from vulnerable individuals seeking meaning in their lives. The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. The other panel members sat frozen, unsure how to intervene in what had become a deeply personal battle between two of the most recognizable figures in entertainment. Cruz's voice rose slightly, his carefully maintained Hollywood composure beginning to slip. You don't know what you're talking about, Whoopi. You've never experienced the peace, the clarity, the understanding that comes from true spiritual enlightenment. You're speaking from ignorance, and that ignorance is dangerous. Dangerous? Goldberg's voice was rising too now, her famous restraint evaporating. You want to know what's dangerous, Tom? What's dangerous is when people can't question, can't criticize, can't even have a conversation about something without being attacked for asking legitimate questions. What's dangerous is when celebrity and wealth are used to silence critics and intimidate journalists. The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point. You could feel the electricity in the air as these two titans of their respective industries faced off in what was becoming an ideological war played out in real time on national television. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every slight movement, every sign that this confrontation was spiraling towards something none of them could control. And then Cruz said the words that would change everything, the words that would transform this from a heated debate into a full-scale nuclear meltdown that would have the entire industry talking. You know what, Whoopi? You're exactly like every other washed-up actress who thinks her opinions matter more than facts. You sit here judging people while your own career has been circling the drain for years. The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members stopped moving. Joy Behar's mouth dropped open. Sarah Haynes visibly recoiled. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked like she'd been slapped. But it was Goldberg's reaction that truly captured the gravity of what had just happened. Her eyes narrowed to slits, her entire body went rigid, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper but carried the force of a hurricane. Excuse me? Cruz realized he had crossed a line, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. You heard me. You've been coasting on Ghost and Sister Act for decades while lecturing everyone else about morality and truth. At least I'm still making movies people actually want to see. The audience gasped collectively. This wasn't just about Scientology anymore. This was personal warfare between two entertainment legends, and everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing television history in the making. Goldberg stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. You arrogant, delusional little man. You think because you jump off buildings for a living that gives you the right to come on my show and insult me in my house? The security team began moving closer to the stage, sensing the situation was spiraling completely out of control. The producers in the control room were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial, but they knew they were capturing something unprecedented. Your house? Cruz laughed bitterly. This isn't your house, Whoopi. This is network television, and the network cares about ratings, not your ego. They brought me here because I bring eyeballs, something you clearly struggle with these days. Joy Behar finally found her voice. Tom, I think you need to. Stay out of this, Joy, Cruz snapped, his composure completely shattered now. This is between me and someone who thinks she can attack my beliefs and my community without consequences. But Goldberg wasn't intimidated. If anything, Cruz's outburst had energized her. Consequences? Are you threatening me on national television? Because if you are, you picked the wrong woman and the wrong day. The other panel members were looking desperately at the producers off camera, silently pleading for intervention. But the producers were torn between their journalistic instincts and their responsibility to their talent. This was compelling television, but it was also dangerous territory. Cruise leaned forward in his chair, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm not threatening you, Whoopi. I'm educating you. You see, in the real world, not this artificial bubble you've created for yourself, actions have consequences. When you spread lies about people's faith, when you attack their beliefs, when you use your platform to spread hatred and bigotry, there are consequences." Hatred and bigotry. Goldberg's voice was rising again, her famous restraint completely abandoned. "You want to talk about hatred and bigotry? Let's talk about an organization that tells people to disconnect from their families if they question the doctrine. Let's talk about harassment campaigns against journalists and critics. Let's talk about taking people's money and promising them salvation they'll never find." The audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a battle for the soul of two very different worldviews, playing out in real time. Cruise's face was flushed red now, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "You don't know what you're talking about. You've never experienced the peace, the clarity, the absolute certainty that comes from finding your true path. You're spiritually bankrupt, and you're trying to drag others down to your level." "Spiritually bankrupt?" Goldberg laughed. But there was no humor in it. "I've been fighting for justice, equality, and human dignity longer than you've been famous. I've used my platform to lift people up, not tear them down. I've asked the hard questions that need to be asked, even when it makes people uncomfortable." Sarah Haynes made another desperate attempt to restore order. "Maybe we should take a commercial break and—" "No!" Both Cruise and Goldberg shouted simultaneously, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger and frustration. Cruise pointed directly at Goldberg. "You want to know what's really uncomfortable, Whoopi? What's uncomfortable is watching someone who was once respected become a bitter, jealous has-been who tears down others to make herself feel relevant." The words hit their target like a missile. Goldberg's entire body language changed. She was no longer just angry, she was furious in a way that made everyone in the studio genuinely afraid of what might happen next. "Has been?" she repeated, her voice deadly quiet. "Has been? I was fighting for civil rights when you were still figuring out which couch to jump on. I was breaking barriers and changing the industry when you were still learning your lines. And I'll be here long after your next movie flops and your cult finally gets exposed for what it really is." The word cult hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Cruise's face went from red to white in seconds. His hands were shaking now, whether from rage or something else entirely. "How dare you?" he whispered, but his voice carried throughout the silent studio. "How dare you use that word? You know nothing about spiritual enlightenment. You know nothing about the technology that can save this planet. You're just another suppressive person trying to stop progress." Goldberg stepped closer to him, her voice rising to a shout. "Suppressive person? Is that what you call people who ask questions? People who think for themselves? People who refuse to be controlled?" The security team was now positioned at the edge of the stage, ready to intervene if the situation became physical. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented meltdown. Cruise stood up abruptly, his chair flying backward. "You're not worth my time. You're not worth anyone's time. You're a bitter, talentless—" But before he could finish the sentence, Goldberg cut him off with a roar that seemed to shake the entire studio. "Get out! Get out of my show!" The confrontation had reached its absolute peak, and everyone in that studio knew that whatever happened next would define not just this moment, but the legacy of both stars forever. But Cruise wasn't finished. Standing there with his face contorted in rage, he pointed an accusatory finger directly at Goldberg. "You want me to leave? Fine. But not before I tell everyone exactly what kind of person you really are. You sit here every day pretending to be some kind of moral crusader, but you're nothing but a hypocrite who destroys people for sport." The audience was completely silent now, shocked by the venom in his voice. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep rolling or look away from this career-ending meltdown. Goldberg stepped even closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that somehow carried more weight than her earlier shouting. You want to talk about destroying people? Let's talk about the families your organization has torn apart. Let's talk about the critics who've been harassed and intimidated. Let's talk about the people who've lost everything because they dared to question your precious beliefs. Those are lies. Cruz screamed, his voice cracking. Lies spread by bitter, failed individuals who couldn't handle the truth about themselves, just like you can't handle the truth about your own failures. Joy Behar finally found the courage to stand up. Tom, you need to stop this right now. This has gone too far. But Cruz whirled around to face her, his eyes wild. Too far? You think this is too far? You people have been attacking everything I believe in for years. You've mocked my faith, questioned my sanity, and now you want to play the victim? Sarah Haynes was visibly shaking now. Security, please. We need security up here. The security team began moving toward the stage, but Goldberg held up her hand to stop them. No, let him finish. Let America see exactly who Tom Cruise really is when he doesn't get his way. Cruise's laugh was bitter and unhinged. Who I really am. I'm someone who's dedicated his life to helping people. I'm someone who's used his success to spread a message of hope and spiritual freedom. You wouldn't understand that because you've never helped anyone but yourself. Help people? Goldberg's voice was incredulous. You call taking vulnerable people's money and isolating them from their families helping them? You call attacking journalists and critics helping them? You call using your celebrity status to silence opposition helping them? The other panel members were looking desperately at the producers, who were frantically signaling from the control room, but neither Cruise nor Goldberg was paying attention to anyone else in the studio. Cruise took a step closer to Goldberg, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. You know what your problem is, Whoopi? You're jealous. You're jealous that I found something bigger than myself, something that gives my life meaning and purpose. You're stuck in your bitter little world, tearing down others because you can't build anything yourself. That was the final straw. Goldberg's composure completely shattered. Jealous? You think I'm jealous of you? You're a delusional puppet who's been brainwashed by a science fiction writer's fantasy. You've sacrificed your humanity for a false promise of enlightenment, and you're too blind to see it. The audience gasped at the brutality of her words. Several people in the front row actually stood up, unsure whether they should leave or stay to witness this unprecedented television moment. Cruise's face went completely white. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible but filled with such venom that it sent chills through the studio. You're going to regret this, Whoopi. You're going to regret every word you've said here today. Is that a threat? Goldberg demanded, her voice booming through the studio. Because if you're threatening me, you better be prepared to back it up. The security team moved closer, but Cruise suddenly straightened up, his demeanor changing completely. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The wild anger was replaced by something colder, more calculating. I don't make threats, Whoopi. I make promises. And I promise you this, your days of spreading lies and hatred are numbered. The truth always comes out, and when it does, everyone will see you for what you really are. Goldberg stepped so close to him that they were almost nose to nose. And what am I, Tom? What am I really? You're a failure, he said quietly, but his words carried through the dead, silent studio. A bitter, washed-up failure who's desperately trying to stay relevant by attacking people who are actually making a difference in the world. The words hit Goldberg like a physical blow. For a moment, she seemed stunned, almost wounded, but then her expression hardened into something truly frightening. Get out, she said, her voice deadly calm. Get out of my studio. Get out of my show. Get out of my sight. Cruise stared at her for a long moment, his breathing heavy. Then he straightened his jacket and turned toward the audience, with a smile that was completely disconnected from the fury in his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice suddenly smooth and professional again. This is what happens when you try to have an honest conversation about faith and spirituality in this country. You get attacked by people who claim to champion tolerance, but can't tolerate anyone who thinks differently than they do. The audience was completely silent, unsure how to respond to this sudden shift in tone. Goldberg wasn't having it. "Don't you dare turn this around. Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim here. You came on my show and attacked me personally. You insulted my career, my character, and my integrity. And now you want to play the persecution card?" Cruz's mask slipped again. "I defended myself against someone who's been attacking my beliefs for years. Someone who uses her platform to spread bigotry and hatred against people of faith." "People of faith?" Goldberg's voice was rising again. "You want to talk about people of faith? I've been in this business for decades, and I've worked with people of every faith imaginable. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus. They don't act like you. They don't attack people who ask questions. They don't threaten critics. They don't try to silence opposition." Cruz's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't know what you're talking about. You've never experienced true spiritual enlightenment. You've never felt the peace that comes from understanding your place in the universe. You're spiritually dead, and you're trying to kill the spirits of others." "Spiritually dead?" Goldberg's laugh was harsh and bitter. "I've got more spirit in my little finger than you have in your entire manufactured persona. At least I know who I am. At least I'm not hiding behind some cult leader's delusions." The word cult seemed to break something inside Cruz. He lunged forward, not physically but with such intensity that the security team immediately moved to restrain him. "Don't you ever use that word!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the studio. "Don't you ever disrespect something you're too ignorant to understand?" But Goldberg wasn't backing down. "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Tom? The truth about what you've gotten yourself into. The truth about what you've become. The truth about what you've lost." Cruz was breathing heavily now, his hands shaking. "I haven't lost anything. I've gained everything. I've gained clarity, purpose, understanding. Things you'll never have. What I have," Goldberg said quietly, "is my freedom, my ability to think for myself, my right to question authority, my independence. And that's something you gave up a long time ago." The studio was completely silent except for the sound of Cruz's heavy breathing. For a moment, it seemed like he might completely break down. Then, suddenly, he straightened up and walked toward the edge of the stage. "I'm done here," he said, his voice hollow. "I'm done with this show. I'm done with this network. And I'm done with people like you who think they can destroy others without consequences." He began walking toward the exit, but Goldberg called after him. "That's right, Tom. Run away. That's what you do best. Run away from the truth. Run away from reality. Run away from anyone who challenges your precious worldview." Cruz stopped and turned back one final time. "You know what, Whoopi? You're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that you had the chance to learn something today, to grow as a person, to understand something bigger than yourself. But you chose ignorance. You chose hatred. You chose to be exactly what everyone already knows you are." And with that, he walked off the stage, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence and the wreckage of what had been the most explosive confrontation in daytime television history. The cameras continued rolling as Goldberg stood alone at the table, her chest heaving, her face a mixture of anger and something that might have been regret. The audience sat in complete silence, unsure whether to applaud or simply leave. The other panel members remained frozen in their seats, still processing what they had just witnessed. And in television history, this moment would be remembered as the day two titans of entertainment destroyed each other in front of millions of viewers, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake.